everyone, I'm Dakota Palicki, and this is Today's Students, Tomorrow's Talent, the Lumina Foundation podcast with newsmakers and thought leaders in the field of learning and training after high school. One of Lumina's most effective tools in creating change is convenings. Each year, Lumina brings together hundreds of stakeholders in over 30 convenings, covering a wide range of topics. In late 2018, we held a convening of state leaders and other stakeholders to provide support and space for their teams to work together. With nearly 200 leaders in the room, we took the opportunity to pull a few aside for a quick chat. Today's episode brings you 3 of those conversations, 1 with a community college president and 2 with state agency leaders. We cover a wide range of topics, and for those watching, it may look a little different than our usual show since we'll be on location. We begin today with Dr. Shanna Jackson, the newly named president of Nashville State Community College. Dr. Jackson's path from the business sector to community college leadership informs her moving forward agenda and a broader vision for Community College 3.0, where completion is the priority. Dr. Jackson, thanks for sitting down with us today. So what's it been like starting as your new role as president of Nashville State Community College?
A complete blur. Things are happening really fast. One good thing about Nashville State is I've been in the system since 2000. So some of the things that a new president would have to learn going into a different state, as far as what the system's interested in, what the state initiatives are, I understand that part. So I can spend my time really getting to know the campus, the 7 counties we serve, and the community, which is different from the community college I came from. So I've been spending all of my time just trying to get my arms around what are we actually doing and where are we on the goals that the system and the state has set for us.
So I'm always curious about people's career paths. Are you originally from Tennessee?
I'm from Columbus, Ohio, and if you had asked me 30 years ago, would I be a college president, I would have probably looked at you and said, I have no idea what you're talking about. I actually came to Tennessee, interestingly enough, from the Pillsbury Company. Out of college, my first professional job was with Pillsbury in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and I came to Tennessee to support the plant in Murfreesboro. So when I was there, I met this guy, fell in love, and we've been married 21 years now. He had an opportunity to go to Knoxville, Tennessee. And so for the first time in my adult life, I didn't have a job. And I answered an ad, a paper ad, that's how long ago it was, to teach part-time business courses for a proprietary school. I thought it was a short term, I'm just doing this until I find something else. And I got in that classroom with students that had all these barriers, the barriers we still see today, the barriers we're still talking about. I was fortunate. In my life, it wasn't a matter of if I was going to college, it was where. So to encounter first-generation students, it was something I wasn't prepared for. Students that had barriers with transportation and childcare and just simply being academically prepared to do college-level work. That was really different for me. It was one of those life-changing moments, and I thought, this is where I belong. And so my first community college was in Middle Tennessee in 2000 with Volunteer State. And again, I had never heard of a community college, even growing up. It was university, university, university. And when you begin to see that a community college and education isn't just about the individual student, but that education, when it's in action, when it happens, impacts the student, their family, the community, the economic development opportunities for the region that it serves, it just changed my whole perspective. And I thought, this is really important work, and I want to be a part of it. And so that kind of started my journey to saying, well, if I'm going to be a part of it, I'd like to be a college president. And that has been a wonderful journey from that moment to this one.
Well, we're certainly glad you're a part of it and a college president. Shifting back a bit to those barriers you mentioned earlier, we often talk about Tennessee having favorable state policy that addresses major barriers like cost and some others. Even with the best state policy, though, students still face challenges. What is Nashville State's unique role in mitigating some of these barriers?
Well, I will say, of course, Tennessee is handling the Tennessee Promise and the Tennessee Reconnect programs from a not equity, but inequality perspective. So everyone has access to affordable education, which I applaud Governor Haslam and all those that have been involved with it. But that is very much the equality model. Everyone is going to have access. that doesn't really speak to the equity piece, which is important, the work that we're coming here to do, and also everything that's happening with our Talent Hub grant, to try to use an equity lens. So I've given you access, but you don't have all the tools that you need. And so really working on that equity piece to figure out, for this student, what do they need? And for that student, what do they need? I remember during the search process, during the open forum, I still believe this. I would love to have an individualized education plan for every student. So you meet with somebody at Nashville State, and almost like a case manager, we figure out what are the things you're going to need to be successful. And so those barriers are still very common. Their transportation, their childcare. There's other financial aspects of attending college, textbooks, that are beyond just the tuition and the fee. So the foundation has made the turn for Nashville State to go beyond financial aid and have the bus passes and working on that food insecurity issue by coming up with vouchers and different programs. But there's so much more to do. And I think the Talent Hub is helping us because they've actually done a lot of listening tours to see what is it really. So when you say childcare, it's more than just they need a place, a quality, safe place. They're telling us that they are concerned about not having time for their kids, period. That they see college as a real barrier because they will be spending all their time in school. How do they find time to study and be that mom or dad? So it's not just the issue of I need affordable child care. It's how do I give up that to come back to school? So we're learning more about the reasons they're not coming or the things that are preventing them from staying by actually going to them and talking to them and not just looking at the numbers. So there's a lot more work to be done in that area, but even the financial situation, the benefit cliff, at some point coming back to school full time, then they can't receive the same benefits, and it's not enough to cover what they'll lose. And so they're weighing that in their decision to come to us. So I think we're starting to really dig a lot deeper in Tennessee, and especially the Nashville State students, because those are the Talent Hub students, our Promise Zone, our low income, how to address those issues for them beforehand and help them figure out how to do college. So that's our goal. We want individualized education plans for them and then to build a body of support around them so that they can complete and they can finish and they can get that good wage job and they can change their family lives forever.
I think one of the challenges to building that body of support that you just mentioned is the adult learner population is just very vast and varied. How does Nashville State have to respond to that particular challenge, treating and make sure that we're not treating adults as a monolith?
It is one we're still trying to figure out, quite frankly. And Nashville State, when you look across Tennessee, has the highest percentage of adults, has the highest percentage of part-time students. That's always been the narrative for Nashville State. And so we can make the greatest impact because I think I know we are the most diverse campus of any among the 13. So our minority population in some of our campuses is greater than our majority population. And so those adults coming back, they all have different stories and they all have different needs. And so one of the things that has to happen at Nashville State, we have to transform our culture. That is like the number one thing I am slowly working on, to build that culture of evidence that we're looking at our data, that we're talking about it, and then we're going beyond that and trying to reach out, working with the Talent Hub to find out more information on how we can remove those barriers. So outreach is a big part of the things that I'm working on because we can't do it alone as an institution. You can't just say, well, we're going to fix this. It's a societal problem. Certainly there's a lot of work that's already been done in policy to make it affordable and accessible. And there's a lot of groups in Nashville alone just working on this in small pieces. So bringing it together to have a comprehensive strategy, again, going back to my IEP for the 52-year-old versus the 25-year-old, I think that's where we're going to see the greatest impact because there is not one solution that's going to work for everyone. And so that is a constant challenge. But one of the things, and there is a young man from Texas, I can't recall his name right now, that I have stolen his slogan. He said, you have to love the students you have, not the ones you wish you had, and that there are no excuses. So I have been using that in my, what I'm calling moving forward agenda to say we're not pointing fingers. We're dealing with who we have and their real situations, and we're not going to let the excuse of what they should have gotten in K-12 or what they should have known. You know, we're really trying to get to the student voice. That's important to me as we try to transform the culture of Nashville State, which quite frankly has been very access and enrollment based. You know, that's Community College 1.0. 2.0 is hopefully access and student success. I'm trying to get them there before we can talk about 3.0, which is that post-completion piece. Because I think we'll eventually make that shift to completion, and then tying that in with labor alignment and really working with our partners, whether they're universities or our employers, is going to make such a big difference at Nashville State. I'm looking forward to it. There's just so much opportunity there that I can see it. It's just changing the culture, the way we talk about things, the way we approach things, really using that data and, like I said, getting down to the student voice so that we're not deciding what they need, but we're working in partnership to accomplish it.
Thanks, Dr. Jackson, for spending some time with us today. We'll be back with more Today's Student, Tomorrow's Talent in just a moment. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. Over 27 million people in America have some college credit but no credential. Each of these students has their own unique reason for pausing their education. Caring for loved ones, working a job to make ends meet, broken down car. Whatever the reason, pausing progress towards a credential significantly reduces the chance of someone ever getting a degree. For many, this pause solidifies into a full stop. There are, however, many efforts underway to turn stopouts into comebackers. We caught up with Dr. Rachelle Sharpe, the Deputy Executive Director of the Washington Student Achievement Council, to discuss how state agencies are responding.
We set our attainment goal at 70%, and that's based on the needs. The majority of jobs require a credential after high school, and we are at 52%, so we have a long way to go. And we know from our modeling that if we close opportunity gaps in high school and dramatically increase our high school graduation rate, we still will fall short of preparing Washingtonians and helping them be competitive. So we have re-engaging adults as one of our top priorities as an agency, but also with our partners. And when we look at our data, and if you don't include the individuals that have a credential or are enrolled in higher ed, 42% of about 1 million individuals have a high school diploma but have not participated in any education beyond high school. 40% have some college, they started, but for many reasons they didn't complete. And 18% are without a high school diploma. So we're really looking at adult re-engagement pretty comprehensively with a focus on some college, no degree, but wanting to create an infrastructure that doesn't have any dead ends. So starting with an interactive portal where students can go and get information, and even though we're focused on those with some college, making sure that students that don't have a high school diploma have really good information about our High School to 21 program and other opportunities.
So, digging a little bit deeper on that 40% that you said have, I captured that right, 40% have some kind of college experience but have yet to earn a credential. Right. That can be treated as a monolith. And I just wanted to hear your thoughts a little bit about how do states need to be thinking about that group, because that's a really large group of people that could include everything from the 18, 19-year-old to the 52-year-old to the single parent to the so what are your thoughts on how we better differentiate within that large population?
Well, some states have really focused on the students that are very close to completing their credential, whether it's a percent of credits or some methodology to look at those that are very close and focus on reverse transfer and other initiatives. We're starting out with a very broad focus, looking at students that have been out for at least a year and had some momentum, but we're getting feedback from our institutions. There's really no policy reason to exclude a student. So when we go to do marketing, we will do some filtering just because it comes at a cost. We want to be inclusive. Some states have said students that have been out up to but no more than 10 years. We said, what is the policy reason to exclude students just because they've been out for quite a bit of time? There are many institutions that want to look at those transcripts and help students evaluate where they are. So really when it comes to segmenting the student population, that will help us with our marketing, with creating images that are appealing to students. And when we have our interactive tool, we'll ask the student some questions. What are your goals? What kept you from moving forward the last time around? And then we'll provide that information to the institutions so that they can really be prepared to be responsive to whatever those hurdles were for the student.
I was also, you've talked a little bit about how your state has been approaching this, but you're also part of Cohort 1 from Adult Promise, which is great. We're getting ready to onboard another cohort of Adult Promise states. What have you learned from either the cohort that you're in or from other states that have been part of this work?
It's so wonderful to be part of that learning community and talk with states not only that are developing an initiative, but those that have tried and been very successful. We've learned from Indiana, Tennessee, Mississippi, and are learning from Maine, Minnesota, and Oklahoma. We started focusing a lot at Indiana's You Can Go Back and learning from their approach with, they had legislation. We did not have legislation, but they were able to partner with their institutions and have a really centralized focus, but with some flexibility for some institutions to do the outreach to students. We also learned to really coordinate our campaigns and our messaging with their next level jobs and You Can Go Back. We talk about Tennessee a lot to the point where we say put a quarter in the jar if you mention Tennessee in our office. With their Tennessee Reconnect and having a really regional approach is really important. And we also learned from talking to Tennessee we really need to use an equity lens at the outset, from student identification, developing outreach. We want the demographics of students who return to mirror the demographics of our state. And initially, Tennessee found that was not the case. Mississippi, with their reporting requirements that are very simplified, but really asking institutions, for the students that you engage with, are they progressing, are they enrolling, and are they completing? And every state has been so generous with their time and their expertise in sharing. Well, the governance structure and the philosophy of a state might influence how you approach the administration of an initiative, but what we found is the barriers that adults face are the same. The workforce needs might be different, but the issues of childcare, or I can't get my transcript out of a prior institution because I owe a parking fee. Some of these systemic issues are really perennial issues that we can grapple with across state borders. So we know that we all need to provide opportunities for adults. How we structure it will be different. Which policy we choose to focus on might be different. We felt it was important that yes, we want to focus on a financial commitment. We're a very strong need-based financial aid state. Other states, Oklahoma is part of the Cohort 1, is not starting with a focus on, or doesn't have the same starting point in terms of need-based financial aid. So we're really trying to build a comprehensive infrastructure that will sustain and last into the future. It takes time to develop that buy-in, but it's interesting that we've had a lot of partners engaged without legislation, without funding that we're able to give to campuses, perhaps because we're starting this post-recession when enrollments are coming down, where there's an interesting timing, a lot of budget pressures on campus, not a lot of ability to put forward a lot of resources, but deep interest and engagement in the initiative.
So what does success look like for the Washington Student Achievement Council over the next 5 years?
I think For us, it's really three parts. Developing a student identification and outreach strategy that will stand the test of time. High school students have an information pipeline. Adults don't. So we really need to build something that will not just be a one-hit wonder. It will last and have an infrastructure built regardless of turnover and leadership change. Secondly is addressing those financial aid concerns. We would like to see our state need grant program work more like an entitlement, but barring that, partnering with institutions to really message affordability for this population in a way that will resonate, including childcare and really unique needs. We're developing a micro grant, which is addressing pre-enrollment, really small dollar barriers. And then completion, which includes a regional approach, developing relationships with employers, and addressing the same issue but in a region where the needs can be really unique and you can have a navigation and supports to help guide students to the program that meets their career goals.
Sounds like a ambitious plan for the future. Got a lot on the plate.
All tomorrow.
That's right. You really have to admire that urgency. If only we had more state leaders who felt the same way. Let's take a quick break and we'll come back soon. Welcome back to Today's Students, Tomorrow's Talent. Refining statewide education attainment goals to include adult learners, creating and deploying talent finance plans, addressing equity at a state level. Ben Cannon, Executive Director to the Oregon Higher Education Commission, has a long to-do list. For our final interview, I sat down with Ben to talk about Oregon's progress in higher education and to better understand how state agencies can drive educational attainment. Well, thanks for sitting down with us. Do you mind just introducing yourself and your name and what you do and all?
I'm Ben Cannon, and I'm the Executive Director of Oregon's Higher Education Coordinating Commission, or HEC, and we're the coordinating board for post-secondary education in Oregon.
That's great. What exactly is the job of the Executive Director of the Oregon Higher Education Coordinating Commission?
Well, I get to run a medium-sized state agency, about 110, 120 folks who are responsible for all of the state work with respect to post-secondary education. That includes the state budget development that we participate in, the state funding administration, so we allocate the resources that the legislature makes available to our post-secondary institutions and students for community colleges, public universities, state financial aid programs that we administer and run. We regulate the sectors of post-secondary ed that come under state regulation, mostly the proprietary trade schools, career schools that we work closely with to ensure students are protected in that work. We keep all the data, so the publics and some of the privates report into us, and we administer vast data systems that track that student progress and completion on an individual basis. And we have a strategic plan for post-secondary ed to meet the state's attainment goals. Will require doing things differently, budgeting differently, different ways of teaching and learning, different ways of building student pathways. So we keep that plan, we advance that plan, we revise that plan, we present that plan to legislators and other constituents, stakeholders, and try to move post-secondary education forward in a coordinating fashion around student success.
So going on the plan a little bit, can you tell us a little bit about what's on the docket for the next 5 years? What are we hoping to do?
Well, lots of big work. We have an attainment goal. We're in the process of actually refining it with a particular focus on our adult population, since we understand pretty well what our goals and aspirations are for those kids coming up through the K-12 system, and now taking a closer, kind of deeper look at the adult goals. So we organize the plan really around that attainment objective, and then we approach it through kind of 4 major areas of work. One is funding, and that's the question of how do we match state investments with our goals around attainment and equity. So that's a big piece of work. Reporting, right? We understand that helping institutions, helping policymakers, helping the public understand how we're doing, where we're succeeding, where we're not, where the gaps are, is really important, and doing so in a timely and useful way. So that's a big second area of our plan. Pathways for students from K-12 to post-secondary, from the workforce to post-secondary and back to the workforce. between and among institutions, including 2-year to 4-year institutions, and building more seamless pathways is at the heart of our strategic work over the next 5 years. And finally, outreach. There are Oregonians, young Oregonians, adult Oregonians, who would like to connect with post-secondary education and training, but don't know how, where. They don't see the opportunities. They're not presented with enough information, resources, and support to connect with post-secondary education. And so we have programs we administer and policies that we will be initiating that are designed to bring more Oregonians into the post-secondary education system.
I'm a community practitioner myself, community mobilizer, and so when my colleagues have been telling me about these, talent-based finance plans, it's admittedly a little bit foreign to me. So I was hoping you can kind of explain it to a novice audience what that actually means.
Well, it's actually pretty simple, and in principle, and it's derived for us. It's derived directly from our chartering statutes in law, which say to the commission that one of our responsibilities is to tell the legislature and tell the governor what the budget will need to be in order to fund our attainment and equity goals. It says that right in the law. We're to develop a comprehensive budget request to meet the state goals. So we look at that, we say, well, gosh, it's going to require more resources. We know that, but how much more? And then how should they be deployed as a budgetary matter and as a sort of funding allocation matter? What should we be doing with that funding? And so that's sort of where we started, was convening a group of stakeholders, some of our commissioners, agency staff, institutional representatives, student representatives, foundations, business, workforce organizations, and others to say, we've got these big aspirational goals. We know we need to spend more money on it. But we don't have a plan for how much more, over what period of time, and in what way. And we should be looking at all the forms of support, federal and state and private, and designing a package, an investment package for the state that fills those gaps and could meet the state attainment needs. We're not done with that work. We don't have a price tag. We know it will be costly. We know it will need to be phased in over time. And we don't know that the legislature will have the ability or the will to go there. But we know that if we don't try, if we don't give them a plan, it's unrealistic to expect them to come up with one on their own. And that's where we are in the work.
You've talked a little bit about some of your equity goals as well, and I was hoping you could just unpack for us about how you and your agency are thinking about equity, and what do you think some of the challenges are out there for creating a more equitable post-secondary system?
Right. From the outset of our commission, and I think it was the commission's second meeting in 2013, second ever meeting where it adopted an equity lens. And it is a statement of beliefs and a set of guiding questions that policymakers should ask when considering any policy for education. And they are beliefs and questions that are designed to force us to elevate in our own work and understanding the needs and priorities of the populations who have been historically least well served by our systems of education. The belief statements and the questions place a lot of value around having the right people at the table, right? They commit us to ensuring that when we make decisions for post-secondary education, and particularly when those decisions are purportedly with underrepresented students in mind, that those underrepresented students, their representatives, their groups are at the table helping drive that policy work. So that lens, those commitments have shaped our agency's work from the outset. The lens puts a particular focus on race and ethnicity, partly because of the historic discrimination and disadvantage that those groups have faced in Oregon as elsewhere in the country, and partly because we know that an intentional focus on the success of communities of color in Oregon will lift all boats. We know that the strategies that work in educational settings for our African American students, our Latino students, our Native American students, and Pacific Islander students will benefit all students in Oregon, and our economy, our viability as a state depends on their success. Finally, it's mathematically impossible, and others have said this today, we understand it's mathematically impossible for us to reach these broad goals for state educational attainment and economic well-being without a real focus on closing the gaps, improving those results for, in particular, our communities of color, our low-income communities, our rural communities, et cetera. I'd say in terms of action, there are a number of things that we've done that reflect the application of those, of that equity lens, but I would highlight the work we did to completely overhaul how we allocate state funding to our public universities. So we get the lump sum from the legislature, as our predecessor board did. Historically, it was distributed out on an enrollment basis. A larger institution got more money than a smaller institution. In 2014-15, we changed that formula, and now about half of the funding goes through is distributed on the basis of degree completion, with the other half reflecting differences in mission and to some extent still enrollment. Most importantly, we put very significant equity weights around those completions so that it's not in the university's interest simply to serve the student who's most likely to succeed. The university gets the most out of the formula when they help that underrepresented student, that low-income student of color, rural student complete. That's the way the formula pays off most for the university, and that was a reflection of the commitment to equity that we made through the adoption of the lens in 2013.
That's fantastic. I mean, I think that's one of the, we've been talking a lot about needing to change the business model of higher education to do just that. I'm also just struck by, you've mentioned your agency's partnerships now a couple of times, both in terms of why it's well situated to move to a more talent-based finance plan, and then of course within this equity lens. And I think that's a struggle. I mean, I think that's a struggle for a lot of states to authentically engage populations and people who feel, and rightfully so, historically not served or not represented well. And I guess if you could provide advice to we're here with a bunch of other states right now, what would you say to other states who are looking to follow your lead and engage with the population to hit their equity goals with, in partnership, in authentic partnership?
Sure. Well, first of all, it's a huge struggle for us too. We haven't figured this out. We do not successfully enough live our talk around connecting with and working in meaningful partnership with the communities who we're trying to serve. But we're trying, and we have done some positive things. I think in terms of advice, humility helps, right? Like walking into the room, walking into the conversation and not assuming that you have all the answers and that you really do need support, advice, leadership from folks who are external to your organization and who oftentimes know the issues and certainly know the communities better than you do. Being invitational, right? It's not enough for us to put on a meeting and hope that folks come, right? And reflect an underrepresented student's point of view, right? You have to invite those students directly or invite the community groups directly. Looking outside of the traditional sort of higher education stakeholders, it's not hard to get the vice presidents for finance to show up to a HEC meeting. It's not hard to get the presidents to show up to a HEC meeting. Certainly not hard to get the government relations staff to show up to a meeting, whether it's universities, community college. And it's not particularly hard to even to get the student association to show up to a meeting. But finding the community organizations who have the deep relationship over generations with these communities, who have known, in some cases, their families from the time the kids were young to the time they were ready to matriculate college, who have supported them in housing, in food, in security issues, in transportation, in childcare, through a suite of services that they may offer as community organizations in a culturally specific way. Connecting with them and tapping the knowledge, wisdom, and understanding that they have, that's what we're beginning to do. And it's not something that higher education, and certainly not something that our higher education state agency has done very well in the past.
That's all we have time for today. Thanks for joining us for this episode of Today's Students, Tomorrow's Talent. If you have a comment or an idea for a future show, reach us at luminafoundation.org or reach me on Twitter at Dakota Palicki. Thanks for joining us.